amazing day already with good conversation and amazing presentations. And this afternoon, we have another roundtable moment, and we are going to be hearing from three very talented theologians on grassroots cooperation. Once again, this afternoon, we will have all three of our panelists present, and then we'll have them do a little reflection together, and then the mic will be open for each and every one of you if you have questions. So take notes, hold your questions, and we will begin at this moment. It is my joy and privilege to introduce all three of our panelists. Father Patrick, I'm going to get your name, Alumuku, did I pronounce that right?
You did.
Thank you. And Grace G. Soon Kim and Juan Sepúlveda. And the three of them will be all taking about 25 minutes to present their papers, and then we'll have opportunity to ask them questions. At this point, though, we are going to hear from Father Alumuku, precisely, and so I'm going to ask the other panelists if you want to sit with me down in the front. Father?
Okay,
thank you.
I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference for inviting me to participate. Governor, Karen, Francis, and all those we have been in touch with in the past few months. Thank you very much. I come from Nigeria and from a little new city called Abuja. It's very much at the center of the city. It would be like Brasilia in Brazil, created because the government wanted the city to be built at the center of the nation. So we have the central point of the country right in the heart of the city. Today I talk about the Christian Association of Nigeria and challenges to ecumenical unity in the face of persecution. And this discussion, I'm happy, is coming after the discussion of Professor Elias, because it already laid a foundation for the background of the Christian churches in Africa, but especially in the West African sub-region, the challenges which they had. So I'm sure we'll understand it better from that perspective. Now, this paper explores the potentials and capacity of the Christian Association of Nigeria as an organization whose birth gave hope to Christian unity and to ecumenical dialogue. It notes how the church, or how the growth of the great Christian organization has been stunted not only by interfaith and intra-faith challenges, but also by challenges of the political situation in the country. But the paper will also touch on the great work of collaboration among Christian churches in Nigeria. The paper examines critically the modus operandi of the Christian Association of Nigeria in the past 40 years since it was founded. It makes recommendations towards genuine ecumenical dialogue to enable Christians of the various denominations work together by appreciating values which others hold. Every time the churches gather in his name, the Lord himself is present. For he himself says, where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there in their midst. Matthew 18:20. And for this reason, the effort towards Christian unity is compelling and imperative, especially now as we face intense persecution as well as other challenges. The question is, what can be done, or can anything be done to ensure that the body of Christ in Nigeria works together stronger and have stronger ecumenical unity? What can be done, or what must be done to help it work much better and avoid fragmentation, so as to face with faith and courage challenges posed to the Nigerian Christians under the ongoing persecution? And I will then be talking slightly about the Islamic situation in Nigeria, which I believe a lot of you know about. You know that Nigeria is that country which is very much under the persecution of under Muslims. You know especially about Boko Haram and the impact of that organization on the Christian community there. I have just looked up what Boko Haram, the damage is done to the people of Nigeria, how many people is killed, and apparently Boko Haram has killed more than 20 times what numbers ISIS has killed all over the world. So you can imagine, but all that in one section of the country, in the northeast of the country. But before we go further, I would like to paint a missiographic portrait of Christianity in Nigeria. Early missionary contact with Nigeria dates back to the 15th century. In the early years of the European contact with the coast of Guinea, the missionary priests traveled along also with traders, either to check the advance of Islam, and at the time seen as the hereditary form of Christendom, or to extend the Christian message to unknown lands. And due to a number of factors, not excluding the slave trade, that first mission failed. And two other attempts were made to implant Christianity in Nigeria, one in the 17th century, another in the 19th century. Present-day Christianity began as a result of the third missionary attempt. And the first missions were opened in 1904 by the Anglican Church Missionary Society. They were followed by other Protestant denominations from Britain, Canada, the United States. But in 1860, the Roman Catholic religious orders arrived, and Catholic missionaries were particularly active among the Igbo and the CMS among the Yoruba in the south. At the beginning, there was intense rivalry, and I refer to the foundation that was laid by Professor Elias earlier. There was intense rivalry, and in some cases, outright antagonism, wherever there was missionary activity in many parts of Africa. Bad News Basi points out that in Nigeria in particular, missionary rivalry was more intense, and Morel corroborates this in his assertion that there was lamentable intolerance displayed by Christian proselytizers towards one another. This disunity was prompted by the attitude of some missionaries who disputed the work of their rivals in the presence of their own African congregations. And regrettably, this disunity was passed on from the missionaries even to native believers. It's important for us to note that while Christianity had experienced overall unity in Europe until Martin Luther, it arrived in Africa as it did in Nigeria, already fragmented. The colonial administrations gave support to the church prevalent in their own home nations. So the French brought in the religion that was prevalent in France. The English, brought in the Anglican faith and so on and so forth. And then it was up to Rome then to try to send missionaries in various parts of the country with different congregations, also to found the Catholic faith in those areas. To a large extent, however, European missionaries were convinced of the value of colonial rule, thereby reinforcing colonial policies. But in reaction to what was considered a colonial mentality, some African Christian communities formed their own independent churches. And with this, the divisions in the Christian camps were exacerbated. So it became worse because of reaction to colonialism, some said, we don't want colonialism, And we don't want the religion of the colonialists. We want to start our own religion. So we'll talk about later, when we talk about the blocks of the Christian Association of Nigeria, you'll find the one block is that of the African independent churches. The post-colonial era brought with it political independence and also gave more powers to local church leaders. But it also came along with new challenges to Christian communities. For example, shortly after the Civil War ended in 1970, the military dictatorship, led largely by Muslim military men, took over missionary schools in some states and took over also missionary hospitals. The military also clandestinely allowed the inclusion of the Sharia provision in the proposals of the famous 1979 Constitution debate. But more worrisome was the fact that the federal government was also subsidizing the building of mosques for Muslims in public places, subsidizing pilgrimages to Mecca and Medina, paying Sharia judges and qadis and public funds which were meant to be of benefit to Muslims. And this were not accorded to Christians and followers of the African traditional religions. You saw at the beginning of my presentation the picture of a church of that building. That is the center for Christians in Nigeria. It's the Ecumenical Center. It was actually called the Ecumenical Center of Nigeria. But people couldn't get to understand what Ecumenical Center was. So they now call it the National Christian Center. That's what it's called today. But now it's built side by side with the big mosque, Golden Mosque of Abuja. So on the left side, on the airport road, in the center of the city, on the left side is a huge golden mosque. And on the right side is built this National Christian Center. The mosque was built, again, as they would say, by the Muslims, because there's a Muslim head of state. Then when a Christian head of state came on, they built the Christian Center. You know, all monies which were not supposed to have been coming from government, but actually they were funded by government and by Christians or Muslims who were at the helm of affairs in the nation. The ensuing military dictatorships of Generals Murtala Muhammad Buhari, who has come back as president now, Ibrahim Babangida, Sani Abacha, may have had their differences, but they were united in furthering the cause of Islam. And so the military government leaders in post-colonial era consolidated the legacy left by the colonial administration, whereby in northern Nigeria, missionary activity was to be conducted on the terms of Muslim rulers. First, they placed limits to places where preaching could be made, certainly not where Muslims were in the majority, neither near mosques, nor near markets, nor public places. And so the people ask, so where do we build our own church? Where do we preach? We can't preach where people live, can't preach near a mosque, we can't have a church in public places, you know, nor near markets. And so they have to find, as you will see later, places out of town in the northern part of Nigeria to be able to start to have their own churches. Then the second, house-to-house visitation was prohibited under the Christian, unless the Christian preacher was invited. Third, no Christian literature would be given to any Muslim unless requested. Fourth, missionaries were to conduct themselves in such a way as not to offend the religious sensibilities of any section of the community. And fifth, they were also to refrain from and discourage any action which might be detrimental to the approved system of administration. And the mode of operation became difficult, not only for the missionaries, but these restrictions were invariably also extended to the Christians. And Samuel Dali knows that Christian citizens of Nigeria were not allowed to live in Muslim areas. This led to the establishment of new sections of cities known as Sabongeris, That will be the Hausa for new towns. In the city of Kano, for example, it began there, the huge city of Kano, the Sabongeris. So Christians began to build their own cities outside of the main Muslim city. A concept that soon spread to other northern Nigerian cities. Now, in the face of all of this, you can imagine that the Christians became a little bit agitated, because here they were in a country where they thought they had the right and freedom to express their religion, but could not. And so these harsh conditions, including taking over of schools and hospitals, became a problem. This became the remote causes for the birth of the Christian Association of Nigeria. The immediate cause of the association then was when the president of Nigeria, then Olusegun Obasanjo, invited the Christian leaders to come to the government house to be able to almost take an oath that they will let children of their own schools say the national pledge and also sing the national anthem at the beginning of the school day in the mornings. And so they came and had a meeting, but afterwards then, they left from there and went into a meeting of theirs. And so providentially, this meeting held by the president became then the reason for the birth of the Christian Association of Nigeria. They left and went to the Catholic Church, Catholic Secretariat in Lagos, and there had the very first meeting of the leaders of the Christian community of Nigeria. The association then was founded to take action on issues affecting the Christian faith and the welfare of Nigerian Christians. Now, I will move to the composition of C.A.N, of the Christian Association of Nigeria. It's made up of 5 blocks. On the first of the blocks, again, I think because of the historical antecedents of how it was founded, it's always referred to as the Catholic Secretariat of Nigeria, and that's the Catholic Church. Number 2 is the Christian Council of Nigeria. Number 3, which is the Christian Council of Nigeria, is the main Protestant churches. This would be the Methodists, the Anglicans, the Lutherans, and the others. Number 3 is the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria. And then number 4 is the Organization of African Instituted Churches. And the 5th is the C.A.N and Ekwa Fellowship. They are actually churches in the northern part of the country, which were in the Hausa-speaking area where the Muslims are. They were giving a special block also in the organization. So, again, the Catholics, mainstream Protestants, Pentecostals, the independent African churches, and then these other ones, the churches in the northern part of Nigeria. They worked a lot towards unity, and the association has its headquarters, as I said earlier, in Abuja. The Ecumenical Center, or the Christian Center, is it's a symbol of unity, and they have as their motto that they all may be one, from John 17:21. To foster unity, C.A.N organizes prayer sessions in which all churches are invited to participate. These combined services, as they are referred to, hold generally at the Christian Center. But the association is also faced with a number of challenges and has inadequacies. Although it has worked hard to unify all Christians, the Christian Association of Nigeria has not only experienced difficulties and challenges, it has also been engrossed in controversies, some of which include the persecution and the Islamic onslaught on the Christian community. The Christian Association may have numerous challenges from within the Christian fold, but the one major challenge from its inception has been the continuous move by the Muslim community in Nigeria to Islamize the nation. And so, as difficult as this looks, every passing year, the Muslims seem to be pushing further and further their agenda. The agenda has always been to dip the Quran in the ocean. So to come from north down to the ocean, and as they would say, to dip the Quran in the ocean, meaning to conquer the entire nation. Now, as I said earlier, Nigeria has a population of about 170 million. Half of the population is Christian. In fact, it is now being generally agreed that about 65 to 70% of Nigeria is Christian. A recent interview by some of those who were involved in handing over the colonial power say that they had actually divided they had actually in the census before independence made up figures so that the north, which was a more docile, the Muslim area was more docile, would have advantage over the Christians who were by far more alert, so the power then would go to the Muslims. And they have said they made up numbers so that they would, the Muslims would have an advantage. You know, generally it is seen that there are more Christians. And every time they want to have a census, Nigerians want to say we want to know in the census form if you are Christian or Muslims. And the Muslims always say, no, we don't want that in the form. So it's fairly clear that there are more Christians in Nigeria than Muslims. Now, there are a number of other controversies, including the fact that the C.A.N appears to be involved in politics. It has also financial issues. Among the challenges has been that the leadership of the Christian Association is playing games so close to government that are not comfortable for the majority of Christians. The leadership work closely with government, and government supports them with money, and then they use money for the executive and for their own activity to the detriment of the Christian community. So that became a major problem. And the Catholic bishops actually, for some of these reasons, have had to suspend their participation in the Association of the Christian Association of Nigeria, and have demanded that unless certain conditions are met, that they will not have any more relationship with the Christian Association of Nigeria. This is a strong point because the Catholic Church is fairly well respected even within the organization, and its suspension of self from the organization became then a problem for the organization, within the organization itself, but also for those who are watching from outside. And now this is the center point of my discussion here, and mainly that because of this then, the association has been deeply weakened and wounded to the point where it's unable to fight and stand out as a bloc against the persecution, which the onslaught of persecution which it has in the country. The bishops have made certain recommendations in which they have demanded, for example, that the leadership can no longer just be by election. It must be by blocks. Of the 5 blocks, every single block must have to participate in the leadership. So the block, apart from the Catholic Church, which is one block, of course, but with about 60 dioceses, will have to choose who the leader will be. When it comes to the Anglicans and the Methodists, they will choose from their own block whom the leader will be the next time. And it will go around the 5 blocks so that the Pentecostals, who appear to be by far more keen on leading now, will not have the chance to lead forever, and insisted that C.A.N is not a mega church, but an association of various churches. And I also want to mention that because of this, the Catholic Church, while pulling out from C.A.N, partially, or at least temporarily, has agreed to start some bilateral initiatives to ecumenical dialogue, especially with the Anglican Church to begin with, and then with the Methodist Church, and leveraging on the work of Archdiocese. They have then tried to step down into the nation the discussions of Archdiocese, of Christian and Anglican dialogue. The issue of Pentecostals is quite a hard one. The clearest shift in the ecumenical landscape is undoubtedly located in the steadily growing significance of the so-called free churches. Of quite special significance in this regard is a rapid numerical increase of the Pentecostal communities in Nigeria. One very important point that has been raised here at the conference, which I think I can also accept it's taking place in Nigeria, is the fact that the rise of the charismatics or the Pentecostals in Nigeria has also brought about an activity of the Catholic charismatics in such a way that the Catholic Church has become by far more active and more vibrant than it has been in the past. I'm just closing now. So the scandal of this unity, while it remains, the various groups are working to see what can be done. And the leadership of the association agrees with the Catholic Church that a new constitution has to be rewritten to take into consideration some of these observations that have been made. And so right now, as I speak, as I had to touch base with the association and with the Catholic Secretariat before I left, and I am told that the work is still going on writing the constitution to take advantage of those suggestions. There are hopes and expectations in Nigeria. Although the ecumenical experience in Nigeria has been bumpy, there are innumerable benefits that the various churches have gained in the process, and which stand out as signs of hope for the future. The possibility of the Christian churches sitting together was unthinkable 50 years ago. But now it's possible. That is that between the Protestants and Catholics, it was not possible even as I was growing up for Catholics and Protestants to even talk together, you know. And in Abuja, a year ago, a pastor came to me and he said, "Father, but this is beautiful. Now we can sit down together and we can talk and we can share ideas." I'm going to close with this conclusion, that African nations are clamoring for peace, on which can thrive prosperity, progress, and development. Religion can provide the basis for peaceful coexistence. The Christian Association of Nigeria has become a symbol of the desired unity of the many Christian denominations in Nigeria. Its significance is not lost to Christians and to non-Christians alike. A strong and united Christian Association of Nigeria will send certainly a powerful message for calm and peace to the Islamic community. The Christian Association of Nigeria, united with the World Church and truly gathered in the name of God, has a great opportunity to lay the foundation for a strong ecumenical example which could serve as a model for many African Christians, leading to peace, prosperity, and development. And it is my hope that this opportunity which the association has will not be lost. I'll put out just a few pictures. Bishops' Conference of Nigeria, the member of the African instituted churches, or independent churches, as some would call it, a Pentecostal church at prayer, And I want to thank you very much for...
Thank you, Father Alumuku, for sharing your expertise. His life and work as parish pastor, vocational director, seminary president, worker in the Vatican in Rome, and great communicator has enriched our time this afternoon. So thank you for sharing all of these things with us. At this point, we are going to hear from Grace Jizisun Kim, and she is an ordained Presbyterian pastor, professor of theology, I would say a prolific writer, and she is an international speaker on issues related to religion, racism, sexism, and social justice. She also is involved in work in reconciliation through Duke University. It is our privilege and our honor to welcome you today.
I've always loved the Catholics because I actually went to, I did my PhD at the University of St. Michael's College at the University of Toronto, and I studied with a lot of the priests. And some of my favorite professors were at Regis College, which is a Jesuit college. So it's always wonderful to be invited to an ecumenical event, but if it's a Catholic event at a Catholic institution, that's even better. So thank you so much. You can always invite me back. But you know, I really fell in love with Pope Francis too. So if I wasn't ordained Presbyterian, I was thinking maybe I can become a Catholic. But anyway, being invited here is the next best thing. So thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Earlier this week I was speaking at another event in Detroit, and Karen was sending so many emails, and she says, if you have the PowerPoint, send it by, I think, Wednesday. And I wasn't planning to do a PowerPoint, but I emailed her and I said, how many are giving you a PowerPoint? She said 8 or 9, and there's more coming. So I thought, oh no, I don't want to be the only one that doesn't have a PowerPoint. So I quickly made a PowerPoint, so this is my PowerPoint. But then I realized I'm not the only one that wouldn't have had a PowerPoint. But anyway, here's my PowerPoint. And then there's so many things I could have talked about, and I thought if it's an ecumenical, I've done a lot of work with the World Council of Churches on climate change. So I thought I'll talk about that. So I hope you'll be interested in that. If not, you could fall asleep, that's okay. I had a theology professor, it was an afternoon class, and every class he came in with a big, thick, what is that, a file folder with manila notes. So these were old notes. And he would sit there and read. So half the class fell asleep, and I was one of the half. So I realized how hard it is to stay awake after lunch. And that wasn't even the bad professor. I had one professor who fell asleep while we did the student presentation.
That's bad.
I know, isn't that bad? And I said, I would never be that. But you know, when I first started teaching, I have 3 little kids, so I almost fell asleep in so many student presentations, but I never did, so I understand. So it's okay if you fall asleep. So it's called Making Peace with the Earth because that's the name of the book. When I write a book, a lot of cases I never get to keep the title of the book that I want. I didn't want this title, but anyway, this one is published by the World Council of Churches, and they insisted that they're going to keep it Making Peace with the Earth. There's already a big book called Making Peace with the Earth, so I didn't want to call it that, but anyway, you always lose. So, and I thought people were confused who I was. I thought I'll just share a picture. I was born in Korea, and then our family immigrated to Canada in 1975. So that's one of the few pictures I have left. I don't have hardly anything before immigration to Canada. That's me with my mom and my older sister. And I couldn't find the original, but I Googled it because I knew I had written something on it for Sojourners magazine. And then the necklace I have at the bottom was, that's the only thing I have left from Korea. So that was a necklace that my uncle had given me on the flight to Canada, and had name and address and a phone number. And you know, if you have kids, your kids never do what you tell them to do, right? So if you tell them to clean up the house, they never clean up the house. And then when you don't say anything, and I was away one time and I come back, the whole house is cleaned up. And then they threw this necklace that I've been carrying around for the last long time, because it went on a huge amount of time, and they threw it in the garbage in the garage. And it was only by fluke that I checked it before the garbage truck came. And I was so mad at them because they never cleaned up the house, and the one time they ever did, they threw this necklace out. But anyway, I retrieved it, and it's now safekeeping because that's about the only thing I have left, as well as the picture. There's a few pictures. So the book came out last year in the spring, Making Peace with the Earth. It's available here. And I think there's about 15 or 20 contributors. I can't remember at this point. But they are, most of the contributors are from the working group committee with the World Council of Churches. And then we couldn't get enough submissions, so then I just went out and invited some of my friends and people that were working on climate change around the globe. So we had a book launch at the Ecumenical Center in Geneva, Switzerland last fall. And some of the contributors were there, so it was really nice. So we had a contributor from Russia, she's in the picture, from Poland, he's in the picture, Canada, from Palestine, and from Norway. So it is a really global book. So if you've ever edited a book, you know how hard it is to edit a book. And it gets even harder when people, their first language isn't English. So this was really, really hard to edit, and a lot of them apologized to me after the book came out. They didn't apologize while I was working on it, but afterwards, and said, we're really sorry that their English wasn't English. It was like Russian English and some other English. So, but anyway, it's a great collection. A lot on theological reflection, and then some of them are actually church workers in the national churches, so in the National Church of Norway, or in Palestine, or in Russia. Somehow they are these grassroots workers, so there are these practical elements in the book. A lot of statistics in the book of what their country is doing or what their denominational church is doing. So this is a collection of various denominations. Oh, that's part of the book launch. I just put my face in there. Okay, so why do we have to make peace with the earth? When the World Council of Churches, they were talking about peace on earth, and they said when you want to have peace on earth, you can't have peace on earth unless you have peace with the earth. And that includes everything on the earth. It's not just human beings. Every time as Christians we talk about having peace with each other, non-war, but it's really, are you having peace with all of creation, and that would include all of the earth. So the World Council of Churches, they really want to emphasize peace with the earth, that we are going to seek this peace. And at this point, I don't think we really are. We are doing so much damage to the earth, so I think we really need to kind of sit back and realize what we are doing. So climate change is one of the biggest social issues of our time. Thank you for that so nice, warm introduction. So I do work on climate change and racism and sexism and actually the Holy Spirit. But I think in a few years, I think everything that we look at, whether it be sexism or racism or whatever we're going to examine within the church, it may be examined through the lens of climate change, because that affects everybody. And it's a global crisis at this point, and the harshest effects will be upon those who are the poorest. So you can, go on laptops and just Google, and there's just so many effects on the poor people. Because what happens with climate change, when the weather is so severe, you get the really severe storms. And so the poor people who are maybe farmers will lose their land. So there are lots of stories where a family of 4 or 5, the father may die in the storm and the mother is left on her own with her really small kids. And then it becomes a spiral effect. And then the mother can't survive, there's no means, there's no home, can't farm the land, and then she will end up selling her children into sex slavery or some human trafficking. So this is a global crisis, and that's why it affects the poorest more with the climate change. And I think it's something that we all have to kind of remember what's happening. So lots of reasons why climate change is affecting the world. I don't know, some of you who are involved with climate change may go to the COP meetings, the United Nations meetings. So I've gone several times, and the last time was in Morocco, but the year before was in Paris, and that was a really important meeting because they were working on the Paris Agreement. And at these meetings, they usually give out, the UN gives out awards to different indigenous groups around the world. So 2 years ago, I was very fortunate to attend the awards ceremony. And when you see what the indigenous people are doing, it's amazing. These are indigenous people in the Amazon trying to save the forest because these huge companies and corporations are going in and just cutting the trees down. So they're these videos that they've made, they show before these people get the award. And some of them are saying they can't wait for governments anymore. Because sometimes they're tied in with the corporations, so they're not going to wait for the government to do anything. So they're going to just do it on their own. So we have to recognize that the temperature is increasing, so we really have to do something about the temperature increase. So then I thought that I have a few slides about a cruise. Has anyone been on a cruise? Okay, a few of you have been on a cruise. Okay, some of us enjoy cruises and others don't. And if you remember in the news a few years ago, I don't know if you remember this particular cruise. So those in the States may remember. Those who don't live in the US may not remember this cruise line. But this cruise line was Carnival Triumph. When they had lost power on the cruise ship. Does anyone remember this one? Yeah. It was horrible because you saw pictures. So I only have a few pictures. So this was in February 2013 where the cruise ship had lost its power. And so if you don't have power, it's going to be dark in your rooms. Some of the cruises, you have inside cabins, so it's dark. So people were like sleeping in the hallways and on top of the ship. It was horrible situation. It was pretty disgusting what was happening on the cruise ship. So 4,000 people were on board who had no showers, no water and sanitation, no air conditioning, and makeshift food and sleeping arrangements. So it's so hot and sunny that they just took sheets and they were on top of the deck. So it was an awful situation, and there's really disgusting pictures online that you can find that I don't think I added here. But just to show kind of what happened on this cruise ship when the power was gone and they were stuck on this ship. What are you going to do? So more pictures of what was happening. And then finally they were able to come back on land. And everybody they were just so happy to be on land that they were actually kissing the ground. Because if you're kind of stuck in that situation where it's so unsanitary, it's like almost it's like a petri dish, and you're kind of stuck there, and you can catch disease. It wasn't a very good situation. As I thought about that, and that wasn't the only cruise ship that had these problems, there have been other ones. I think when we think about what happened on that Triumph Carnival, it may be similar to what's happening on this planet. And the effect on the climate, what the people experience on the cruise is a smaller scale than what's happening on the planet. And I think if we don't take it seriously, I think other countries around the world, I think Europeans are doing a better job than the Americans. So if we don't take it seriously, and now that we've got this new government, we don't know what we're doing, what's going to happen, that it may actually get worse. Because this is the only kind of planet that we have. So what are we going to do? It's much like the cruise ship, you know, when it's polluted like that and we've got nowhere else to go, this is the same situation on planet Earth. We've got nowhere else to go. So I think it's kind of a wake-up call. Just when we see images of the cruise line like that, how are we going to kind of save this planet? So I do a lot of work on feminist theology, and I think as Christians, we look at the planet as feminine, and that's not just Christians. I think just globally we've called it always Mother Earth, and I think that has been a little detrimental to how we treat the planet. Because when we view, especially when we see what the church does to women or society as a whole, and even under this present government, how they view women, you know, it's a place of domination, subordination. You can do what you want with women, and we see that happening with the earth. And I think we have to reimagine the earth, and I think that's something particularly for theologians to do and people in the church. How can we imagine creation? How do we view God? So one of the things that the World Council of Churches also works on is the Ecumenical Water Network. And 2 years ago, they were focusing on the Middle East and the injustices that we find in Palestine and in Israel, that the Palestinians don't get clean water. So this water justice issue is a huge thing. He says I only have 5 minutes. So water, we know, is vital for life. We, you know, the earth is unique because of the water, but now they're saying perhaps on Mars there's water. So 2/3 of the earth is covered with water, and ocean holds 97% of that water. The remaining 3% of fresh water is found in the rivers and lakes, below the ground, and in glaciers and ice caps. And then glaciers and ice caps are 69% of the fresh water, groundwater is 30%, rivers and lakes are 0.9%. So much more water in the lakes and rivers, about 200 times more. When we think about this water distribution and where we can find water, there is enough water, but there's always an unequal distribution of water. You know, when I was growing up, water was free. And, you know, whoever came up with the crazy idea to bottle it and sell it, you know, you wonder how they got away with it and are still getting away with it. So actually today you were talking about creation not for sale, and I was going to bring in this thing because of the Reformation, and the Lutheran Church is working on the theme that creation is not for sale. So, you know, we sell everything out of creation. You know, we're bottling water and we're selling it when water should be flowing and given to people who need the water. So it's interesting because we are celebrating the 500th anniversary, and in Africa, I know the Lutheran Church, they're doing some big event next week. And I just want to share a quote from Carolyn Bader, who is the Lutheran World Federation Youth Secretary. And she says, because I was writing an article, and then so she gave me this quote to use. Luther's intervention at the time of the Reformation reminds us that there are aspects of life on this planet which, for the sake of both earthly and eternal life, should not be commodities and should never be for sale. That includes the good creation God has given us to watch over. So I think because I'm Protestant, you know, we always think of ourselves as reformers and forever reforming. You know, when Luther was reforming the church, I don't think he really understood or had in mind climate change. But because climate change is such an important issue of our time, a political issue, a social justice issue, that if we as a church are reforming the Protestant churches, this is something that we really need to take into consideration. So I'll just wrap up. There's all these things about stewardship. Okay, so this is the book that will be coming out this fall. It's volume 3 that I've been working on. So this is I've been working on 3 volumes on global gender justice and church doctrine. Because church doctrine for a long time has been written by men. Sorry to all the Catholic theologians here. So we Protestant women, and actually Catholic writers. We are trying to reimagine church doctrines. So this will be the third volume. It's coming out in the fall by Fortress Press, and it's called Planetary Solidarity. So we've got contributors around the world. There's a global gender justice issue. Sally McVeigh, Yvonne Gobera, Sharon Baum. So it is a really global approach. These women, I think there's 15 women reimagining even creation, God, Holy Spirit, etc., etc. But I think this is something that we really need to take into serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I want to make note that I don't see anyone sleeping out there.
Thank you.
Friends, we now are going to hear from another ordained minister of the Pentecostal tradition. Juan Sepúlveda is here with us, and he is going to be sharing his expertise. He comes as one who has, like Grace, some significant experience with the World Council of Churches. Juan has been working with the joint working group of the World Council of Churches and the Roman Catholic Church, and brings some words to us this afternoon. We're very thankful to welcome you.
Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. So I am going to share about the experience of ecumenical cooperation in the context of, or under the context of military dictatorship in Chile, 1973 to 1990. As in all Latin American countries, during the colonial period, Catholicism was the only religion allowed in Chilean territory. After the achievement of national independence, Catholicism remained the official religion for more than a century, a period in which Protestantism, with the support of liberal political leaders, was slowly gaining the right to be tolerated as the private religious practices of foreign residents. Even so, non-Catholic immigrants were considered dissidents, and they did not enjoy the fullness of civil rights until the so-called secular laws or lay laws, civil registry, civil marriage, lay cemeteries, were approved between 1882 and 1884. By the year 1925, a new constitution established the separation between church and state, legalizing religious freedom or plurality. However, the Catholic Church retained a privileged legal status until 1999, when a common legal framework for the operation of all religious organizations was established. Despite the restriction mentioned, the main denominations deriving from the reform were already beginning to enter the country by the mid-19th century, while the first Protestant churches entered the country in connection with European immigrations, Lutherans and Anglicans. Later others came in connection with missionary purposes, Methodists, Presbyterians, Baptists, etc. At the beginning of the 20th century, a Pentecostal revival took place, mainly within the local Methodist Church, giving rise to a popular and dynamic indigenous Pentecostal movement. Later, during the 20th century, other evangelical and Pentecostal denominations began their missionary work in Chile. So emerged the current picture of Chilean Christianity, with about 77% of Catholic population and about 19% belonging to the numerous Protestant or evangelical churches, mostly Pentecostals. It is worth noting the presence of Orthodox churches, which, although statistically is less significant, are another actor within the Chilean ecumenical scene. Until 1970, The impact of the ecumenical movement in Chile was felt only in the relationship between or among the different Protestant and evangelical churches. In the context of a Roman Catholic Church numerical, cultural, and political dominance, the evangelical and Protestant churches needed to work together to achieve some degree of influence on government authorities and move forward on the path toward a plural society, religiously plural society. In contrast, relation among Protestantism and Roman Catholicism continues to be characterized by competition rather than by cooperation and mutual recognition. The majority of Catholic clergy considered the missionary work of non-Catholic churches and religions to be a threat against the cultural and religious identity of the country, one that would inevitably lead to non-belief. Such a view on the clergy's part generated conditions for discriminatory and intolerant behavior against non-Catholic religious groups by the Catholic population. Meanwhile, the evangelical minority, which during the 20th century became mostly Pentecostal, accumulated resentment for what they perceived as discriminatory treatment. In addition, they interpreted such treatment as evidence that the country's Catholic majority was Christian only by name. They say nominal Christians. Thus, Catholic believers, far from being seen as brother and sister in Christ, were seen as non-believers and therefore recipients of evangelization. Although a sector of the Catholic Church episcopate in Chile was quite active in the proceedings of Vatican Council II, the conciliar document's impact on ecumenism in the local relationship between Catholic and Protestant was not immediate. A few Catholic priests started to establish contact with some Protestant pastors. However, they had to wait until various political factors created the condition for gaining the hierarchy's attention. The first of these political factors that have an expected impact on the development of local ecumenism was the 1970 election of President Salvador Allende. Allende, a socialist politician who did not hide his atheism, won the presidency on behalf of Unidad Popular, a left-wing political coalition that included all secularist political sectors, among them the Communist Party. His election raised doubt as to whether he would respect the tradition of celebrating the presidential change of command in the Santiago Cathedral with a Catholic Te Deum. Allende expressed his willingness to maintain the tradition, but asked Cardinal Silva Enrique to invite representatives of other Christian churches and religious traditions to take part in the ceremony as well, as a way to recognize the country's religious plurality. Cardinal Silva Enrique welcomed the request, and from that point forward, the Catholic Te Deum, which is held in 2 occasions, the presidential change of command and the commemoration of national independence, became an ecumenical event. This ecumenical character of the Te Deum meant that Protestant pastors and Orthodox priests participated in the Bible readings and prayers, while the preaching remained a responsibility of the Catholic Archbishop of Santiago. It is worth noting that this change also had an interreligious dimension, as a representative of the Jewish and Muslim communities were also invited to pray in the Te Deum. The beginning of these ecumenical liturgical practices generated the need for an official body of coordination among the churches. This initial communication between Protestant, Catholic, and Orthodox ministers is what eventually led to the creation of the Chilean Ecumenical Fraternity. A second political factor was the growing division and polarization within Chilean society that generated the deep social and economic reform promoted by Allende's government, in an international context still profoundly marked by the Cold War. Relations between supporters and opponents to the government became increasingly violent, such that both in the press and in everyday conversation, the fear of civil war began to surface. The seriousness of this situation became a stimulus to strengthen the emerging ecumenical relation established to coordinate the participation in the Ecumenical Te Deum. Thus, in August 8, 1973, the Chilean Ecumenical Fraternity was formally organized. And a month later, at noon on September 9, 1973, an ecumenical public meeting of prayer for peace was held in the Constitution Square in front of the Presidential Palace. The invitation came from the Catholic Church, various Protestant and Pentecostal churches, the Orthodox Church of Antioquia, and the Jewish community. Given the deep polarization of the time, convening this meeting seemed to have created some concern on the part of President Allende about the risk of possible partisan use of the meeting. In response, Cardinal Silva Enrique gave assurance of the meeting's religious nature in support of the search for a non-violent solution of the situation. A third and more determining factor, political factor, was the military coup, which took place just 2 days after the previously mentioned ecumenical public meeting of prayer. In addition to the violent overthrow of Allende government, the forced closure of parliament, and the prohibition of the operation of political parties, the new military authorities imposed a series of measures which included the following: dismantling of social and trade union organizations, eliminating benefits and social policy, many of which were institutionalized even before Allende's government, liberalizing the economy, including the prices of food and other essential commodities, and brutally suppressing any attempt to resist or oppose the new state of affairs. During the first days, the curfew and the eradication of the right to assemble, to meeting, affected the operation of the churches. Soon, however, people understood that the new prohibitions did not include the freedom to conduct religious services. This allowed the churches to become a relatively protected space to meet and encounter others, not only for the regular members, but also for neighbors shocked and frightened by the nation's prevailing circumstances. On September 14, 1973, the same group of ecclesiastical authorities who has called for the day of prayer the previous Sunday made a public statement calling churches to pray for all the fallen, for their families, and for the real respect of all human rights. At the same time, they initiated contact with the military authority, asking them to allow the joint and organized action of churches in order to provide humanitarian assistance to those individuals and families most affected by the circumstances. This joint action meant, firstly, the creation of an ecumenical institution for the defense of human rights, the Committee for Peace, and subsequently the Vicaría de la Solidaridad, the Vicariate of Solidarity. This experience is within the scope of Michael Cooper White's paper, will be presented tomorrow. So I will focus on my part on illustrating the new ecumenical practices that emerges at the grassroots level in response to the local impact of the new national circumstances. While the military repression affected more selectively political activists and leaders of social and trade union organizations, the main impact of these changes on the general public was the rise in prices and the accelerated increase of the unemployed. Both of these resulted from the neoliberal economic measures the dictatorship imposed. In the poorest urban sector, this soon led to hunger and malnutrition. And this was the challenge that motivated the first local ecumenical responses. Local church buildings, whether Catholic or Protestant, were used to house soup kitchen to ensure at least one meal a day, mainly for children and the elderly. Ecumenical groups of women volunteers were formed to carry out the work of collecting food donations, cooking meals, and serving tables. The boys and girls being cared for in the soup kitchen were exposed to a variety of risks associated with the process of impoverishment and the general climate of uncertainty and hopelessness. For example, increase in drug addictions and youth crime. And this situation raises the need to provide activities that would offer them emotional support, opportunity for playing and recreating them, and ways to strengthen their ethical formation. Responding to this need were young people who volunteered, forming ecumenical groups that organized informal play groups and subsequently urban colonies, that is to say recreational activity programs carried out in their own neighborhood during the school holiday period, for example. Soon, this methodology of creating volunteer ecumenical group was replicated in response to other problems experienced by the community. Groups linked to local churches that were more active in a given territory, usually including Catholic, Evangelical, and people without active membership in any church, were multiplying. Workshop for women, housing committees, health committees, informal school for parents, collective or group buying, for example, not only in the poor neighborhood of Santiago, but also in other cities around the country. The development of these ecumenical practices of solidarity at the grassroots level was facilitated by the example and public impact of the ecumenical action carried out with the direct support of ecclesiastical authorities. The mission of the institution initially created to defend human rights was extended, and new entities were created to support the local ecumenical group with training and funding, channeling resources provided by international ecumenical agencies of cooperation. Face-to-face contact and cooperation among Catholic and Evangelicals facilitated the overcoming of prejudice and stereotype of the past, and little by little contributed to the mutual recognition as brothers and sisters in Christ. Thus, there soon appears a new dimension of this local ecumenism: praying, reading, and reflecting on the Word of God in ecumenical liturgies convened on a special liturgical date or in response to critical situations. During this period, the observance of the Week of Christian Unity, promoted and organized by the Chilean Ecumenical Fellowship Fraternity, had the highest level of participation ever, mainly in Santiago, but also in other places, with ecumenical prayer meeting held in various neighborhoods, whether in Catholic churches or Evangelical churches. In 1982, when a movement of massive protest began demanding the return to democracy, political repression increased again. this time in a much less selective fashion, arresting people only for taking part in the demonstrations, while many leaders were internally exiled to quite isolated places within the country. Although the demonstrations were expected to be non-violent, the repressive response generated clashes that often resulted in the death of some protesters and in a greater number of injured people. In this context, the plight of those who were detained, internally exiled or injured, as well as the funeral of those who died, became occasion for frequent ecumenical visits, liturgy, vigils that involved grassroots Christians as well as ecclesiastical authorities. Responding to emblematic cases of human rights violations that resulted in victims' death, many public ecumenical activities were organized involving grassroots as well as official ecumenical participation, such as the following: the Chile Defiende la Vida, Chile Defends Life March on August 9, 1984. The funeral procession following the assassination of French priest André Jalland on September 4, 1984. And the campaign of prayer for life, peace and reconciliation, which culminated with an open letter to General Pinochet from the Christian Fellowship of Churches on August 29, 1986. The Christian Fellowship of Churches, Confraternidad Cristiana de Iglesia, was founded in 1981 by 10 Protestant churches, including some Pentecostal ones, and the Orthodox Church of the Patriarchate of Antioch, all working in close cooperation with the Catholic Church. What I have said so far demonstrates that under the exceptional condition of Chilean society during the 1973 and 1990 dictatorship, there arose a movement of intense ecumenical cooperation, ecumenical fraternity, and this movement played a major role in the process of rearticulating civil society and returning to democracy. However, these ecumenical practices did not last for long after the beginning of the process of democratic normalization in 1990. The most important external factor influencing the gradual disappearance of this practice was that the restoration of the rule of law meant that it was no longer necessary for churches to serve as safe havens, as they had done under the dictatorship. On the other hand, the first democratic government, in order to ensure democratic governance and national reconciliation, decided to downplay the role of an organized civil society, despite the fact that it had been decisive in the ending of dictatorship. From the internal point of view of the churches, another important factor seemed to have been the obvious difficulty the ecclesiastical leadership had in reassessing and reorganizing their role in an open society. And for churches, this meant a loss of prominence within the public sphere and public deliberation. The resulting uncertainty and confusion on the part of the ecclesiastical leadership prevented them from taking a more active role in guiding their communities through rethinking, in a now democratic context, the new ecumenical practices that were born under dictatorship. Therefore, what happened was that the churches entered their own process of normalization, returning to their traditional pastoral strategies, as if the rich experiences of ecumenical cooperation born under the dictatorship have been merely a parenthesis in their lives, justified only by the exceptional character of the political situation. However, coming back to normal did not mean coming back to the competitive and rather belligerent relationship that had previously existed between Catholic and Protestant Christians. At least one permanent impact of the exceptional ecumenical practices under the dictatorship is that Catholic, Protestant, and Evangelical churches in Chile have moved into a new relationship of mutual recognition and respect. An example of this occurred in 1999 when a group of churches, including the Catholic Church, the Santiago Church, not the whole country Catholic Church, signed an act of mutual recognition of Trinitarian baptism, based on the Baptist Eucharistic and Ministry document on the eve of the celebration of the Great Jubilee of year 2000. So this is an example of how things change, but unfortunately the practices that were born in the period of crisis did not remain as a normal relationship in the churches now. Thank you.
If I could have Father Patrick and Grace, if you would come forward to what you've heard from each other. We've had three very specific examples of ecumenical cooperation. And I'd like to have you reflect a bit on each other's presentations around the idea of what you see as the major strengths of one another's grassroots ecumenical movement, and reflect on how those strengths might be translated into even other contexts globally, ecumenically. So you might need a moment to ponder. And Father Patrick, you look like you might want to respond.
Yes, I think I'd like to start by looking at the presentation by Grace, Making Peace with the Earth, in which she talks about the need to make peace, not just with people, but with the entire earth. And she makes very strong points about the need to work for safety on earth. And so we need to take more care to conserve what we have, conserve water, conserve the forests, that we have. And while she was presenting, what came to my mind is the situation that we find in which in the past, while I was in secondary school, we had a beautiful river, and we had a secondary school on the hill. We used to go down to fetch water, and even to go to swim. When I went back there, about 20 years afterwards, I found that the river was gone, totally dried up. And it's a shock to me. But when I look at what we experience, especially with the Sahara, we find that the Sahara gradually is growing down south. So a number of countries, such as Niger, Chad, Mali, and others are gradually being deforested. That is, no more trees there. And as you fly down from Europe through Africa, you will find that the green part of Africa much further down, when you come into the first cities of Nigeria and so on. It's a phenomenon that is quite frightening. Now, what the implication of all of this is that a number of these countries can hardly plant crops, and they depend then on countries that are more green, down in the sub-Saharan countries to be able to produce. And so they're depending a lot on the food from here. They import food and grains to take up into those areas. That kind of touched me very closely. Now, with regards to the presentation by Juan on the ecumenical cooperation in Chile, I think that I was caught to heart with the examples that he offered of young people who volunteered as Ecumenical group members are helping the poor and the needy, you know, and the solidarity that they had to help, you know, those who were needy to create a better society. I think that we need to do that. The churches can do so much if they work together. One of the points I was making throughout my own presentation was the fact that if the churches worked together, there is so much they can achieve. There is so much they can achieve. You know, I think it was yesterday when Sister Okure was making this very strong point that we do not seem to see the strength that we have if we are together. People see us as a united team, but we see ourselves more as separated people, you know. With the case of the Nigerian Muslims, if the Nigerian Muslims saw the Christian Association of Nigeria or Christians in Nigeria as a united front, they'll have by far more difficulty trying to challenge them. You know, the unity then becomes a force that brings about calm and peace, you know, within the region. These are some of the points I think I want to draw from these presentations. Thank you.
I'm the translator. Juan is saying that his and Patrick's presentations have focused on when ecumenical relations grew out of crisis.
Y en el caso de Chile, cuando esa crisis cambia la situación, como que las relaciones ecuménicas tienden a perder su vitalidad,
And then when the crisis period passes, in Chile at least, the ecumenical fervor began to erode and to wane.
Me estaba preguntando, Grace plantea una situación de crisis que nos afecta a todos.
Grace, by contrast, is presenting a crisis situation that affects the whole world.
Mi pregunta es por qué ha demorado tanto en despertar más ampliamente a los grupos de iglesia. Es decir, hay movimiento, pero es todavía minoritario y necesita ser más masivo como respuesta a esta crisis.
And so he's wondering, it appears that thus far the crisis Grace has explained has awakened relatively small group of churches and other people, and it's going to require a much more massive response to have a positive impact.
Thank you. So I think kind of what you both said is what I was going to reflect on too. I think the youth is very important. And when I think about climate change, last COP meeting, COP22, we have religious groups coming to the meeting. So the World Council of Churches is there, our Religions for Life, our Religions for Peace, a few other ecumenical groups are there. And not just Christians, there are Buddhists and Muslims and other groups. But it was very interesting last fall, in the Morocco COP22, the Lutheran Church, they only sent youth delegates to the COP meeting. And they did that on purpose, and it was so refreshing to see these youth who are so involved. And all other delegates were actually from Africa. They decided they're going to focus on Africa, so all their youth delegates were coming from Africa. And that was just so refreshing to see that they were so energetic. And whatever issue it is, ecumenical issue, either in Nigeria or Chile, I think if we don't get the youth involved, the young people, I don't know if we can reform or change the church. So I was really glad, I'm Presbyterian, but to see that the Lutheran Church was going to focus on the youth and then also focus on just African youth, because they are going to have, I guess, the next meeting in Africa, and then So it was just so refreshing to see, and I hope that other ecumenical movements or the Catholic Church or any of the Protestant churches that as you were discussing and as you were discussing that, I think that would be the future and maybe the key to allow us as people of faith to really move the church to make peace with the earth. So thank you so much. I think somehow it got tied in.
Yeah.
Thank you for those responses. At this point, the mic is open, and I would invite anyone with questions to come forward. When you come forward, if you would just state your first name, that would be lovely. And please do address the group with the mic. So does anyone have any burning questions that they'd like to bring forward? Go ahead.
I'm Bill. Thanks for your presentations. There's a short story by Flannery O'Connor where this very unpleasant old woman gets into a car wreck and they meet these criminals. She, at the very end, becomes very eloquent and says some very kind things to the criminal right before he shoots her. And after he shoots her, one of the other criminals says, "She would have been a good woman if there'd been someone there to shoot her every minute of her life." And that kind of reminds me of some of what's happened here in this panel, because there's, in these moments of crisis, when there's somebody there to shoot you, that's when you get together and create this kind of unity. And that's a problem, right? Because then, you know, I mean, the church in Chile was very excited and energized under Pinochet and wanted Pinochet to, you know, iba a caer, right? They wanted him to go, and then when he went, there was a kind of identity crisis. What do we do now, right? And so the question is there something kind of dangerous in kind of forming an identity that's based on opposition, right? I mean, and Patrick, this comes out of your presentation as well. You know, you said that kind of presenting this united opposition to the Muslims in Nigeria will create calm and peace, and it might, but it might not as well, right? You know, if you, I mean, the Muslims might find this threatening, for example. But the question is, for the Christians, is there a way to form these kind of ecumenical relations and this sort of identity or dealing with these crises that's not dependent on opposition, right? I mean, when you want to create unity, is there something about a unity that's created in opposition to others that's inherently problematic? So I wonder if you would all want to kind of reflect on that.
It wasn't really directed to me, I think it was more to you, but I could say something. I think, you know, there is a push, but I think at this point, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or woman, young or old, Christian or non-Christian, religious or non-religious. This is going to affect everybody, this climate change. So I don't know if you were, if you're on Instagram, but if you were on Instagram and you can follow the astronaut Scott Kelly, the American astronaut that was out in space for a year, and you know, he was just posting these beautiful pictures on his Instagram account of the Earth and of space, and I thought, if I was any younger, that's what I want to be when I grow up, an astronaut. So I could go and take beautiful pictures and post it on my Instagram account. But I think it just shows you, this Earth is so tiny, and you know, he's showing how the temperature, you know, he's looking and he's realizing that things are changing on the Earth. The heat is changing and the ground is changing. And it's really an alarm for all of us, a wake-up call that it doesn't matter if we're Christian or not. It's this thing that we're doing to the Earth is damaging. I know there's a Korean, and there might be other Koreans in the crowd. So some of us in Korea, we use this term Han, spelled H-A-N, and some Asian American theologians are using it too. It's to describe this unjust suffering. And most of the time when we discuss unjust suffering, you know, suffering happens in all levels. You know, people suffer in Chile and in Nigeria and other parts of the world. But there's unjust suffering when systems are set up to cause unjust suffering. Whether it be discrimination or sexism, these are systems that are set up. And when I do work on ecology and eco-theology, I think really the earth is crying out. So Juan is this unjust suffering, so we cry out, and I think the earth is crying out. And if we fail to listen, whether we're Christian or Catholic or non-Christian, or Buddhist or Muslim, then we're going to just end up destroying the earth. So I think that it's good that there's this push. I think that's what you're talking about. But we shouldn't have come to this point. We should have always taken care of the earth, but we're very greedy, and with corporations out of greed, and just as human beings as greed, we're just greedy, we just destroy it. Anyway, it wasn't really addressing your question.
Okay, maybe I should just add that I think that this is a very good question, because there's a lot more that is happening within the Christian communities in the context which I discussed, and there's a lot more that can be done from within, and not just because of the problem that is outside. There's a lot that is happening positively. For example, the liturgical music in the Catholic Church is greatly being transformed through the influence of the Pentecostal churches in Nigeria. And this is an area where there is so much, that needs to be done, that can be done to enrich the Catholic Church, for example. There is also a lot that the Catholic Church is learning from the Pentecostals in terms of architecture, for example. The nature of the churches that we have, especially the new churches in the cities now, have more light, for example, less pillars within the church. There's a more visibility of the altar, very much like the Pentecostal churches are, partially because the way the Pentecostal churches are built is in such a way that they are media friendly, because everything is done to be able to focus on the pastor who is preaching, and so less encumbrances of pillars and things like that. And so a lot is being done in that area. The Pentecostal churches are also gradually learning from the Catholic Church. There was a very curious video that went viral last year. I think that Benny Hinn, the pastor, the Pentecostal pastor, had been to Nigeria and was preaching to the Pentecostal pastors. And he said to them that there are more miracles taking place. The research has shown that there are more miracles taking place in the Catholic Church than in all the Pentecostal churches put together. It's on YouTube, so you can actually Google it, and you will find that. And he said, why? He said, because of the Eucharist. He said, the Catholics believe in the Eucharist, and they put their attention on the Eucharist because they believe that Jesus Christ is present in the Eucharist, and so on and so forth. And that becomes, a huge issue within the Pentecostal churches. Of course, what we saw then, shortly after that, was the Pentecostal churches began to gradually even to have vestments like priests. And then we began to see them have also chalices and body on the altar, and lay hands on the altar, for the Eucharist, and so on and so forth. But what I'm saying is that gradually there are a number of things that consciously or unconsciously are taking place between the various churches that is bringing them together and uniting them. I think these are forces that are likely to help us look inwards and find a reason for unity. That's what I have thought about a lot while preparing for this discussion, is a need for a profound discussion on the theology of ecumenism, which the churches don't do. For example, the 5 blocks of the Christian Association of Nigeria has never really sat down to look at issues such as what unites us, baptism, the Eucharist, and so on and so forth. So there is a need for the Christian churches to come together to look at issues that are deeply and profoundly ecumenical, doing things that unite us. You know, from there then the whole ecumenical movement and dialogue becomes by far more useful. Because as it is at the moment, to a very large extent, people talk about social ecumenism, or as they say sometimes, of political ecumenism. Because when it comes to social problems, we stand together. As someone said earlier this morning, when there are issues, we come together. But we are not thinking theologically about actually profoundly those things that unite us by virtue of our faith.
Un tipo de articulación y de diálogo que sea más estable en el tiempo y no solamente reaccionando a situaciones externas.
Thinking about the factors that impede developing a foundation for ecumenical relations apart from crisis.
Es que en países como Chile o en América Latina, la cuestión de las relaciones de mayoría-minoría entre los grupos religiosos es muy determinante.
In countries like Chile and throughout Latin America, a major factor is the disparity of size of communions.
Sumado al otro lado de que el cristianismo como conjunto es mayoritario. Entonces la pregunta es cómo entender la misión en un contexto de una población mayoritariamente cristiana. Entonces es difícil entender misión de una manera que no sea competitiva, que no sea una guerra por fieles.
I'm going to try. Yeah, we're talking about cultural contexts in which the vast majority of people are Christian. So to forge a sense of ecumenical mission is a challenge. What is the nature of that mission?
Ecumenical mission that's not competitive.
That's not competitive.
Right.
Thank you. Right.
Sí, por ejemplo, ese fue un tema importante en la conferencia episcopal de Aparecida, de la Iglesia Católica. Y ellos plantearon la necesidad de una misión que no entre en la lucha proselitista.
So this has been a major factor in the Latin America Conference of Bishops consultations, how we can forge an ecumenism that is not proselytism. Proselyting.
Claro, pero me da la impresión de que ese tema no tuvo interlocutores por parte del mundo protestante. Entonces, la pregunta por la nueva misión todavía es una pregunta que no, ¿qué significa esa nueva misión en América Latina?
And the challenge in that context was there were not the Protestant, non-Roman Catholic voices in the conversation. So again, we're in quest of what this nature of mission might be in Latin America.
I wish to follow up with the question of Professor Kavanaugh, and more again in the inspiration or the motivation for ecumenism in Africa. And I think I would like to draw you out more, Patrick, on this, because when you look at countries like South Sudan, Central African Republic, Egypt, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, and maybe Senegal. These are countries in Africa where Christians have united, not because of the need to respond to the Lord's call that all may be one, but rather it's unity in order to fight, Muslim, what is perceived as Muslim persecution. But in many cases, like in South Sudan, even when there is a formal separation, now we have predominantly Christian South Sudan. We've seen the conflagration and even the exacerbation of greater violence. Therefore, what do you think should motivate people to really seek this part beyond thinking that Islam is the problem? I'm not saying that there's no challenge about Islam in sub-Saharan Africa, but yeah, I worked at the Catholic Secretariat in Lagos, you know, for this organization, and it's always like our problem is Muslims, and once we're united, then all the problems in Nigeria, and now in Central Africa, this is also the issue now between the anti-Baraka and the Sereka, and then the Christian Catholics have united, especially since the visit of Pope Francis. But there are more killings going on. So I'm just wondering if religious persecution in Africa, that we should look even deeper at the African predicament beyond this understanding of our problem as Christians, as Muslim persecution.
Thank you, Sam.
Well, thank you very much. I think that there are many reasons that could unite Africans, African Christians, in this context, in these situations which you mentioned. But I think that what will unite Africans, African Christians, in ecumenical dialogue wouldn't be anything different from what will unite Africa, or will unite Christians in any other parts of the world. Namely, that there are things which are common to all Christians. What are those things that unite us? We are united by the very fact that we are children of God by baptism. And so we belong to a family. We are members of a family. So we show love to others because we belong to this family. That is deepened even by the communion which we share. The communion which God has given to us. Can we work harder towards this body which Christ is giving to us? We are united by that communion to which Christ has invited us. He has invited each one of us, and through communion, then we share in that one body, which makes us one, which brings us closer. We mentioned earlier the whole idea of following from the idea of being a family and sharing in the body of Christ. We've mentioned also today very strongly the need for us to work for one another, to serve others, instead of lording it on others, or thinking we are superior to others. You know, these are values which I think if we put in place, we will see so much that can drive us towards being united. But I looked back at during my research period to find out how much is being done, especially in Africa, in these areas. And I found there are churches that are willing to accept members into their communities without baptism. And baptism is the basis for which we come together. And once we understand what baptism means, we then feel the sense of unity, the sense of family that we have. But there are churches today who accept members without, you know, wanting whether they are baptized or not. as long as they are making their own financial contribution, in the church, and this is a situation that is real, So if you have the members of a church who are not baptized, on what basis can we start talking about ecumenism? That's the basis. Then we move on to sharing, something that is by far more important within the same family, communion. And then coming together. There is no one who is more important and no one who is less important within the community. So then you see that law begins to spread. At Easter this year, we had the opportunity, we usually have a transmission on television. So we came together, a number of pastors from about 5 or 6 different churches, and we're discussing the resurrection. And it was so enriching, us talking about the Triduum of Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and then of course Holy Saturday, leading to Easter Sunday. Our Protestant brothers spoke intensely about Good Friday, about Jesus dying on the cross, and of course of the resurrection. But by the time we finished this, we had to be like 4 segments that were going to be broadcast for 3 or 4 days on television. By the time we finished, we found there's a lot of common ideas that we shared, in these discussions. We, for the very first time, we met, but we went on chatting, and they've made useful contribution even to the discussions that we've made here today. So gradually, I think that what is important is for us to realize the things that are central to us. I think from there then, the ecumenical journey, begins and grows.
Thank you. We have, Christian has been standing at the back of the room waiting, and we only have a very limited amount of time. So I'm going to ask those of you who raised your hands, if you would save those questions. We're going to go from this place into reception, and we'll try and work in one more question from Christian.
Yes, so it looks like we're not going to, I'll try to make this as compact as I can. But you did bring up a thought beyond what I was going to ask before when you talked about baptism. Having grown up, Pentecostal, but even beyond that, one of the things I've observed is the sinner's prayer phenomenon, where they would be like, that was the most important thing, more like a radical interpretation of what Luther said about faith alone. And so I would hear the debate would be, well, do you really need baptism? It's kind of like, that's just an outward sign. There wasn't really a need for the liturgy or the sacraments or anything like that, and all that was just an outward show, and it was about this inner belief in Christ as Lord and Savior, that if you did that, like you go to the big Billy Graham crusade, and it would be like, if you said this prayer with faith, you are now saved. So that's a lot different from now me coming into the Catholic Church, where there was the sacramental process of, of course, baptism, and then all the rest with the liturgy and the sacramental life of the church where God is going through the sacraments. But with them, it was just more like this inner realization of this relationship, with Christ. And so I guess, could that be looked at as the lowest common denominator as far as what makes one a Christian? Or do you kind of see, it absolutely must be that you've gone through this baptism? In some churches only baptize in Jesus' name, whereas you have Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Whereas I know coming into the Catholic Church, I was raised up in Oneness Pentecostalism, where they did baptize in Jesus' name. And so I had to actually get re-baptized with all, under the Trinitarian formula. And so then that would be another element. And then also, you know, like from the Pentecostal side being more new, I think, compared to how long the Catholic Church has been around, it could also be more of a challenge for unity to attack the established order as being decadent and decaying, because this is how you're going to get more members. Like if you're in Latin America and everybody's Catholic, and you got a few people, where are you going to get them from? By discrediting the established order and bringing in more members, where I think it might be easier for those who are already established, maybe the cult unity. And then that kind of brings me to this other thing. I mean, do you see this unity in diversity? And then who is the focal point of unity? You know, or does there need to be a focal point of unity from the Catholic standpoint here, except the leadership of the Pope and everything would come together? But then I'm sure that there could be, you know, other interpretations as well as what this would, you know, look like.
Christian, you have a tendency to ask these amazingly difficult questions. And we are all anxious to hear what these brilliant minds might offer. We are at the end of our time, however. And what I would say is, for those of you who had your hands raised, and I don't want to disrespect your questions either, but also in response to Christian's question, these are deeply profound questions. If any one of you thought you could give me a 1-minute response, I would say go for it. Otherwise, I would invite you, as you are gathering over across the way for the reception before this evening sessions begin, that you might have those conversations with these individuals there. So anybody want to take a 1-minute crack at this?
Well, I just want to say that you grew up Pentecostal, so I grew up Presbyterian, but then my dad thought the church was more than a church, but it was an English school. So I went to a Baptist church on Sunday night, and then an Evangelical church on a Friday night, and then Pentecostal revival services every 2 months. So I had it all, and then I went to Anglican church when I was in university, and then I ended up going to Catholic school for my PhD. So I'm very ecumenical in a way, but I think that's the beauty. And then I'm teaching actually at a Quaker school, so where they don't even really talk about sacraments. So I don't know if we really need a common denominator. Actually, Quakers, what they say is that of God in everyone. So but we get, Presbyterians are so into every little detail, but I don't know if we really need a common denominator. I think at this time and age, we just need to love. So you can read one of my books there, Embracing the Other. Read that one and we can just go with love, I think. I don't know, it's such a deep question, but that's my one.
Thank you, Grace, for that.